Well, my next story is really a family story. It's about my parents. You've seen my mother's mink and her hat box and her crystals. But this story is more about my father. My father was a scientist. He had a PhD in physics. And when the family moved to Los Angeles and he started working at North American Aviation, well, he was happy to be surrounded by the science he loved. And every new innovation, every little bit of scientific discovery, he embraced it. Lasers and radar, anything. In fact, there were a few things that caused a little bit of trouble. Once, he brought home from the lab something that they'd been working on that he thought had some really good possibilities. It was a solution that became known as Teflon. Well, he brought home a little spray bottle of it, and he thought, just the thing. I could spray it on the walls of the shower, and I wouldn't need to clean them so often. Now that sounds logical, doesn't it? Well, the master bath in our home, which these days would be highly sought after because it is mid-century modern, it had a mid-century modern master bath, completely tile, pink tile, with blue tile accents. My father did not tell my mother that he had brought home this experimental solution. My mother was not always enthusiastic about his experiments. And so one day, when she was out of the way, he sprayed on the tile walls of the shower. What he did not count on was that it was a very fine spray, and the overspray, well, it went beyond the walls of the shower and pretty much Tefloned the entire bathroom. Several of us slipped and almost killed ourselves. And I know that when I went into my parents' bathroom and slipped and almost fell down, I went back out to the dinner table and I said, "So, Mom, did you just wax the floor or something?" And that was what she'd been waiting for. She looked at my father and she said, "Okay, Bob, what did you do?" And he had to sheepishly admit that he had Tefloned the bathroom, and of course it took him a while to scrub it all off. But he was undaunted. He loved anything scientific, any new thing, with one exception, and that was television. My father hated television. He loathed it. He called it tele-invasion, and he thought that's what it was. People invading your home, that they don't know you, they don't care about you, but they tell you what you should think. Well, he was having no part of that, and we would not have a television. As you can imagine, that did not make me happy. Well, I had watched television before at my friends' houses. I would go over to play, and they would say, "What do you want to do?" And I would say, "I want to watch cartoons." They would say, "We could do that anytime." And I would say, "You can do that anytime. I can't." And sometimes they felt so sorry for me that we would watch cartoons. Not always, but that's usually what I requested if I had a chance. Well, we begged and pleaded and begged and pleaded and begged and pleaded, didn't we, Janet? My sister's here. She can verify all of this. She can't verify all of this. She's much younger than I am. She doesn't remember any of it. But I'm here to tell you this is the truth. We begged and pleaded and begged and pleaded, and finally my father gave in and ordered a television. I remember very well the day that it arrived. I was in first grade, and I came home from school. Now, my mother was at a PTA meeting, and my brother and sister were being babysat by our usual babysitter. Her name was Frances Swanson, and she lived at the end of the block. She was, as I remember, very, very old. She was probably younger than I am now. But she was very, very old. And she was strict and sort of dour. Not a lot of whimsy in Frances Swanson, for sure. But I came home. Well, I must tell you, though, there was one thing that was cool about her. She came from Des Moines, Iowa, and she taught me how to spell Des Moines. And I won at least a couple of playground bets on the strength of that. Well, when I came home that day, though, I was excited about what was coming. And sure enough, the big furniture store van came in front of our house, and 2 delivery men delivered our television set. It was in a huge maple cabinet. That's how televisions came in those days. And so it took 2 of them to wrestle it into our house. and to put it there in our den, we called it, the place that we'd set for it. And then, oh, I was in heaven. The delivery men, they set it down and they turned it on to cartoons. And I sat down so happy in my chair, in my house, in my den, watching my TV cartoons. It was great. It was perfect for at least an hour. And then there were no more cartoons. It was news. Well, of course, back then we only had 3 channels, but I didn't want news if there was a chance there might be more cartoons. So I jumped up and headed for the TV, and Frances Swanson said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to change the channel." She said, "Oh, no, you're not." I said, "Well, yes, I just want to see if there are more cartoons." She said, "Do not touch that, Missy." She called me Missy when she was annoyed with me. I said, "I'm not going to wreck it. I'm just going to change the channel. I've done it a million times at my friend's house." And she said, "Well, you're not going to do it now. Your parents have ordered this brand new television set. What would they think if they came home and the first time they saw it, you had already broken it?" I said, "I'm not going to break it." She said, "You're not going to touch it." So I flounced back to my chair and sat down and watched the news. Because when you have a new TV, you'll watch anything. Maybe some of you still do that. I don't know. Well, after that, there were rules about television watching. And you've probably had a few in your life. Most of the rules involve things like not sitting too close, because it would ruin your eyes, of course. But most of my father's rules were about not watching the TV. He wanted to really minimize that. And so we were given strict instructions when we could watch and how long. But a few years passed, and we got old enough to babysit ourselves, and then the game was on. My parents would go out for an evening, and when we heard their car at the bottom of the driveway, we'd jump up, turn on the TV, sit back and watch whatever we wanted until we heard their car come up the driveway, and then we'd jump up and turn off the TV and watch as the picture sort of shrank down in on itself. You remember those? Until it was just a little white dot, and then it just got smaller and smaller and smaller. And we were always kind of holding our breaths, hoping that the dot would disappear before our parents walked in. Sometimes we'd have to dispatch my sister to the back door to waylay them so we would be in the clear. My parents were not that stupid. They realized soon that all they had to do was just walk over and put their hand on the TV. And if it was hot, we were in trouble. But my father was not so interested in punishing us for breaking the rules as preventing us from watching TV. So one evening when my parents left, we waited. When they were gone, we turned on the TV. Nothing. It was completely dark. We thought, we didn't know it was broken. It seemed to be working yesterday, and nobody said that it was broken. But so we had to do homework and stuff. When my parents came home, we couldn't tell them the TV was broken, because if we told them it was broken, they'd know we tried to watch it. So we kept mum. But the next time they went out, nothing. Well, not for nothing, we were children of a scientist. We applied the scientific method to our problem. We investigated the best we could and realized quite quickly that the little press board panel on the back of the television, it had been removed. It was kind of loose. It was not screwed in. So we took that off, and well, there was the forest of vacuum tubes, right? We looked at those and we thought, But it became clear, well, at least reasonably clear, that there was one little cap just hanging there, and it kind of looked like it might fit on the top of one of the tubes. So we performed an experiment. We put that on there, the tube, and then we turned on the TV. Voila, perfect. So now when my parents left, it was a little more complicated. We had to take the back off the TV, we had to put the little cap on the tube, turn it on, and then reverse the whole process when they came home. But my father must have sensed our disobedience, because not long after that, one evening, we turned on the TV, we went to turn on the TV. We had to look in the back. We saw, there were several of the tubes just lying in the bottom of the cabinet. Well, that was kind of a problem, but we were up to it. So we started fitting the tubes in where they belonged, and it worked. It was great. My father was not satisfied. A few weeks later, when we tried to disobediently watch TV, we opened up the back of the television set, and it was very clear. One of the tubes was gone. Apparently a crucial tube. My father knew. And my brother and sister and I, we always thought that we would get our money together and we would go down to the Woolworths 5 and dime and we would go to one of those kiosks, do you remember, with all the tubes and the little tester thing on top, and we would buy ourselves the right tube. But we never did that. And it wasn't very long after that that the entire TV broke. Probably because we'd been doing so much fiddling with the tubes in the back. Well, my father said that was it. No more TV. He wasn't going to replace it. He wasn't. He just wasn't. And over the course of a couple of years, we begged and pleaded and begged and pleaded, and we pointed out to him that there were a lot of educational programs on TV. Perhaps you remember them. Hemo the Magnificent, Vanishing Prairie, Our Mr. Sun. And after a while, the church conference was on twice a year. How could he resist that? And finally, he bought another TV. It was a little black and white portable, and it was easy for him to control. If he didn't want us to watch TV, he'd just pick it up and put it in the trunk of his car, and that was that. Yes, he had an answer for every one of our little indiscretions. Well, after a while, that broke too, and my father said, no, that really was it. No more TV. We begged and pleaded, and he was adamant, no more TV. He said he would never buy another TV, never. After a while, we kind of gave up. And I went off to college. We didn't have a television in my dorm room. So by the time I came home the next summer, I was weaned. I didn't think about TV anymore, unless every now and again somebody talked about some popular show, and I would be totally clueless. But mostly, I didn't think about it. And my brother and sister had given up too. And my father had won. But that summer, in July, one Saturday, late afternoon, just before the stores were going to close, my father disappeared on a mysterious errand. And when he came back, he had a big box with a brand new TV. We were open-mouthed. We hadn't even been begging and pleading or anything. And he had gone out of his own free will and bought a new TV. We couldn't believe it. But it didn't take us long to figure it out. Because the next day, July 20th, 1969, all around the world, people were sitting in their living rooms watching as man's first steps were on the moon. And all around the world, everyone was dazzled and impressed and amazed by all the science that went into that kind of an event. And in our house, well, sitting there in our living room watching our TV, we were dazzled and amazed too. Oh, we were dazzled and amazed and impressed about the science, but even more so at the fact that we couldn't think of anything else that would have caused my father to buy another television. That's the story of my father and the TV.